talk to us about the visualizing VT history part of the 150th anniversary celebrations that are going on right now. This is a team that includes myself, Doug, Thomas, Jessica, Nick. Sarah's a new addition to the team. Welcome, Sarah. And several other folks, but I think Paul's first slide is going to tell us about that. So I'm going to just turn it over and let him go ahead with
it. Okay. This is a tiny bit embarrassing because we're, talking about using high-tech techniques, but I need to ask what screen am I sharing right now? I've got a different kind of dual monitor situation going on. Can you see a PowerPoint slide or not?
I'm seeing what looks like your retirement account. I'm thinking you probably need to sell.
Okay, good. GameStop?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So you can see visualizing Virginia Tech history slide, right?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. So I did, well, first of all, thanks very much for having me along. It's good to see the new people and good to see the familiar faces as well. And what I did is I put together a collection of slides with the idea that that can just kind of structure the conversation. But what I'm going to do is try and pause very often so that people who are here in the meeting who actually are working on these projects and know more about a lot of it than I do can feel free to jump in and expand or raise additional issues. But basically we're a large team visualizing Virginia Tech history. VT 150 is one of our other names. And we are working, as Todd said, on new visualizations, new ways to understand and present Virginia Tech history as we gear up for the sesquicentennial. And when we started this project, it felt like a long way away, but now it's almost here. Technically, it's 2022 when the university turns 150, but the university is going to make the most of this occasion and is going to start in fall 2021. So really in just a few months, you're going to be hearing a lot more about the sesquicentennial. So our group is focusing on digging up hidden histories, using creative technologies, and our method is transdisciplinary experiential learning. So lots of students involved as well as faculty members. And the context of our work is the Council on Virginia Tech History. It was formed in fall 2017, and it had sort of, its origins were sort of twofold. One was awareness that the sesquicentennial was coming, even though it was still nearly 5 years ago, 5 years in the future at that point. But also around that time in 2017, there was a lot of public conversation about building names. This was just in the wake of Charlottesville. Lots of people across the country, including Virginia, talking about monuments, building names, public history in general. How do we commemorate the past? Which aspects of the past do we want to commemorate? So that all fed into the formation of the Council on Virginia Tech History. And the idea was that we would tell new stories in new kinds of ways and also focus on hidden or marginalized histories. And our team, Visualizing Virginia Tech History, is just one component of the work of the council. There are other projects which include, there's a group working on physical historical markers. So I think they're probably gonna be erected either later this year or early next year. And you'll see them at several key places on campus, including Solitude, which we've worked on a lot. Also Henderson Lawn, kind of the center of the original campus with its predecessor of the Preston and Olin Institute, Hillcrest Hall, and a few other places as well. So that's one thing they're working on. You may also have seen announcements for a public art competition, because at the beginning of this whole process, it was observed by many people, I think, that Virginia Tech is not very good at public art. You know, we have very few statues or sculptures of any kind on campus. The vet school is an exception. They have a nice statue of a kid and a horse. And then just a couple of years ago, I don't know if anyone has seen the big beagle they unveiled there. So that's kind of the exception though. You know, if you walk around campus, you just don't see much in the way of statuary or other kinds of public art. So there's a competition going on, and that will result in something new appearing somewhere on campus. And I think it's probably going to be around solitude. VT Stories is the oral history project, which was already ongoing, but kind of takes on new importance, I think, as we commemorate the 150th. My colleague, Peter Wallenstein, is publishing a couple of books on university history, and then there are going to be various kinds of performances going on as well. So that's kind of the context of our work, and we, speak to the other projects. We try and collaborate, and we have sort of formed our agenda and our priorities in conversation with the History Council as a whole. But we are a transdisciplinary collaboration. These are the departments, I hope I didn't leave anyone off here, that are involved. And several of these departments are obviously represented here today, which is great to see. We have lots of students who have worked on the project over the last few years. This is where I have to make an apology to Sarah, because this is an old slide from last fall. And we have several new members of the team, including Sarah, Joe, Rebecca, Tom, and Pablo. So I simply have failed to contact you all and ask for a picture, but that's something I need to do. And Sarah, feel free to send me a picture if you think of it before I contact you. But this is just, you'll recognize some of the faces, faculty and students, just to give you a sense of the size of the team and the makeup of the team. And what we do is we try and bring together the quest to uncover hidden histories with creative technologies. Or Thomas and I have been talking with David about digital technologies as an alternative description there, but basically using technologies like augmented reality, like projection mapping, to bring hidden histories to the surface, to present them in new kinds of ways to different audiences. And that's essentially what we do. We've done it in a variety of ways. We're always asking the question, and this comes from our collaborator, David Hicks, I think. Todd, did he come up with this question to begin with? If this place would talk, what would it tell us? Yeah, so that's something David and Todd and Thomas and some of the others have asked and addressed in other projects, and it just fits really nicely with what we're trying to do with university history. So lots of different topics, lots of different methods and kind of sub-projects underway. You can find out more. We've got a website, which is vt150.omeka.net. I've got it on the last slide in case you want to actually see it, if that makes it easier. But if you go to vt150.omeka.net, you can see a sample of some of the topics we've taken on over the last couple of years. Solitude is a really big one I'll talk more about in a minute. We've also looked at different kinds of women's history. We've looked at student protest. We've looked at Black community building, Black student experiences, and really there are countless other topics that we could take on. And hopefully as we move forward, we'll be able to add more to our roster. So that's sort of the big picture. And what I've got in the rest of the slideshow is examples of some of the projects we've worked on. So student protest is one, that's sort of the first big topic that we sunk our teeth into. And then solitude, which is taking the form, to begin with at least, of a headset augmented reality tour that Nick is developing. So that's the other thing I've got a couple of slides on and we can talk more about. And then the final example of a topic is African-American student experiences, which the history undergraduate student Kenny Barnes has developed some really great, interesting content on. And we're currently working with Todd and some of the students in Aries to kind of turn that into a handheld augmented reality tour. And then projection mapping. Thomas is the ringleader there. That's another big part of what we've been doing so far. So again, I've got some slides for each of these projects, and a couple of them have got video clips or still images in them to give you a sense of what we're up to. But I think maybe now is a good time just to hit the pause button, see if anybody wants to add anything or ask any questions. Just feel free to dive in.
Quick question. You talked about some of your virtual reality kind of spaces. Are they kind of like I bring my own equipment and I just show up to the site and then I can engage? Sorry, I'm trying to eat and stuff my face. So do we show up to the site and actually bring your own equipment and you can just engage with the space? So it's just like you're kind of like a tourist, or is it something that you have to go and check in and acquire devices and then go out there, kind of like a Disneyland experience?
Yeah, that's a really important consideration. Our hope is that we'll do a bit of both of those things. So with Solitude as the example, that's the place, the topic we've done the most work on so far. Nick has worked over the last, 2 and a half, 2 years, just put an enormous amount of work into developing the headset AR tour around Solitude. And so because it's headset based, you know, a random person is not presumably going to show up and be able to experience that in any easy kind of way. So that's going to be more an experience where we invite people at certain times, or we're sort of hoping as well that the building will be managed, is in the process of changing hands at the moment. We're sort of hoping that, you know, at least during the sesquicentennial, the building will be staffed by someone who can control the headsets and guide visitors around. But it definitely needs some kind of staffing, somebody actually there to, you know, give people the headsets, help them work them, show them where to go, that kind of thing. There are big advantages to that, I think. You know, it makes it more of an experience, and it means that people will experience it together in groups, which I think enhances the experience in a lot of cases. It also means that visitors will feel as though they're being guided or they're being shown this experience by someone with expertise, which I think helps. But obviously the disadvantage is, you know, a random person can't just show up with their phone and take the tour. So what we're trying to do is convert that headset tour into a handheld form that will be accessible, you know, on a phone or iPad. So it's still, you know, you could still do that as part of a group experience. Like if somebody wanted to bring a group of students there and they had some iPads, or the students brought their own phones or something. But it also means that hopefully we'll get to the point where, you know, somebody is just wandering around campus, they see on one of these physical markers I mentioned, there's hopefully going to be even just a sticker pointing, whether it's a QR code or a URL, pointing someone to these enhanced digital experiences. So I guess the short answer is hopefully both of those things, but we're still kind of figuring out exactly when that's going to happen.
Okay. My second question to that was like, is it, I guess, where do you converge? Like, how do you start the experience? But I think you kind of said it's like, maybe it starts at Solitude. We'll maybe talk offline, but we had a project where students were kind of talking about remodeling the visitor center. We're making that kind of like a check-in center for the whole campus, and you acquire your equipment, lab. I like that idea. So great.
Yeah, and on that note, one of the really central aspects of our vision is the projection mapping display. So this is a slightly old video. So Thomas, hope you don't mind, that's not the latest one by Nikita. But I think it will give you a sense of the projection mapping experience. And what we're doing with this is we've got a 3D physical diorama of campus, and then we've got a TV screen in the back, and we tell the story of 150 plus years of Virginia Tech history using this medium. I'll just hit the play button just while I'm talking, just so you can get a rough sense of how we're going to use this technology. What we're hoping to do is place this actually inside Solitude, inside the building. And as I mentioned, it's kind of changing control right now. So it's been hard to get a definite answer as to whether we can claim just a little corner of Solitude. But that would be our ideal situation, is that this lives for a period of time in Solitude. People can come, they enjoy this projection mapping experience, they get a sense of the big overview, the big picture of Virginia Tech history, and then they can go off and explore some of the theme tours, especially, of course, the Solitude one, but also some of the other experiences as well. Does anyone want to jump in? Thomas, Nick, you know, I've talked about both your projects already.
Yeah. What you just kind of see a teaser of the projection mapping. It has evolved from what you see there, and definitely we still have just a passive experience where you walk up to this kiosk. We're definitely going to work on interactivity this semester, where you can basically touch a timeline and kick off different aspects of it. And also, hopefully down the road, you can also hit different buildings, and it would illuminate and maybe tell a little bit of the history of each of those buildings. So not just a passive experience, but you could be a little bit more engaging.
Yeah, and I would also add, this is a little further in the future, but we're also hoping that we'll be able to do an enhanced version of this in the Cube in the Moss Arts Center, yes, which will take advantage of the facility there. And the History Council, I think, is hoping to do some kind of event at the Moss Arts Center, so this would fit perfectly into that. Other questions, or any other team members want to jump in and add anything to what I've said so far? Okay, so that's totally fine. I can just move through and just show you a few examples of the kinds of things we've done. And this is another short video clip, which will give you a sense of what we started to do a couple of years ago with the student protest theme. And just really quickly, this is in the age of the Civil Rights Movement, the Vietnam War, shortly after the Kent State shootings. There were protests at Virginia Tech. I mean, they had started before Kent State, but they kind of accelerated after Kent State, and they culminated in the occupation overnight of Williams Hall on Virginia Tech's campus by a group of more than 100 students. So we have put together some material on student protest. There's an online exhibit on our website. And a couple of years ago, we started the process of building an augmented reality experience, and the details, I think, are still being worked out as to exactly where this project is going to end up, but this gives you a sense of where we started. It's basically using historical photographs and imposing them onto the real world, and then giving some narration and text that describes what's going on.
Paul, I think if I can either say a little more about that now, or it may make sense later to discuss it in terms of what some of the students are working on today with Kenny's tour, because that's really the kind of the evolution of this idea.
Yeah, let me, I'm just gonna go down. I've got a slide. I mean, this is just an image, since, you know, we're early on in the development of this, but yeah, I think this would be an excellent time to bring that project up.
Yeah, so Kenny Barnes is a senior, right, in history, which is unfortunate. They keep, growing up and going away. But he's been leading the historical research on the story of the Black community and where it started at the university and, where it is now. And another student, Pablo, is working on an independent study that spawned out of, was it Sang's class that he was in last year?
Yeah.
He and a few other students did a 360 video tour of Pedro Yates, and he wanted to continue working with that. So he's going to be developing a 360. Oh, sorry, I'm totally spoofing your whole presentation.
No, this is good. I'll just change the slides. This is perfect.
So they did that, and he wants to continue developing that. So he's going to work with Kenny to make a 360 video based corollary to what will be an outdoor AR walking tour. And so a few ARI students are working with Kenny to continue the idea that Dylan was showing in that video from a few years ago, of being able to look at historic photographs in their context. And we'll add in photos and some videos and things like that, as well as some text and some audio. But whereas the previous version was a native app in iOS, what they're going to try to do is build it in, I think they've chosen to go with AR.js to try to build something that's using web technology, so that there isn't the need to try to distribute something to people's devices, and so that it can work across a lot of different devices. And we would be able to let anyone who walks up to some manner of a kiosk, say, for example, at the visitor center or Solitude, see some sort of iconography to let them know that, hey, there's something you can do, and they could just do a QR code and launch that website and follow the AR tour. So, and now I'll hand it back over to you, Paul. Sorry.
No, I'm definitely glad, and everyone else should feel free to jump in as well. Like, I've got the slides, but I can jump back and forth. That's no problem at all. Yeah, and I think, so you're probably getting a sense now of the way we've done things is we've probably begun by developing certain pieces of historical content. So we've started out with historical research into these different topics. We've created the digital exhibits using Omeka, and these are all digital exhibits available at vt150.omeka.net. And then what we've done is kind of thought and reflected on what kinds of technologies would get this content out in an engaging way to members of the public, members of the campus community. And it's been really cool, I think, to experiment with different formats for the same, essentially the same content, to sort of figure out what works in, AR, what works in VR, what belongs in the projection mapping, so that we're taking full advantage of specific technologies. Let's see, so the big one, as I mentioned earlier, let's see, here we go. Really the project that is furthest along that, we and especially Nick have put the most work into is Solitude. It's the oldest building on campus, rich layers of history, I'd say, stretching even further back than the founding of the university in 1872. And so we've emphasized different phases or layers of the history of the building, but also the land around it. And so these are some of the themes we've tackled: indigenous land around Solitude, and really further afield, the New River Valley. We've looked at Solitude as a slave plantation. We've looked at the evolving architecture of the main building of Solitude. Thomas Tucker developed some really good 3D models of what the building looked like before it was renovated and before it was expanded at various points. We're continuing to fine tune and tweak those models. And just looking at it also as a university building that's been used in a variety of ways. It was used as faculty housing. It was used as an infirmary. It was used, there was a kindergarten there at one point, I think connected to one of the faculty members who lived there. And after World War II, it was home to, or the grounds of Solitude was home to probably a couple of dozen trailers to house veterans who, you know, were flocking to universities like Virginia Tech, thanks to the GI Bill after World War II. So I don't have it to hand, but there's a great aerial photograph from the late 1940s of basically a trailer park around Solitude to house these veteran students. So anyway, there's lots to discuss, and I've got a couple of just short video clips, not the full thing by any means, but I'll play these clips, and then Nick, feel free to jump in. Jessica, feel free to jump in, anyone else as well. And this particular clip shows one of my favorite features, which is, this is Kara Mosley Hubbs, who's a descendant of the Fraction family who were enslaved at Solitude. And so she has helped us out a lot with this project, acting as kind of a virtual tour guide. So we filmed her against a green screen background, and then we can place her, you know, onto the landscape in front of the Fraction family house as a kind of tour guide.
My job was to work with the oral history aspect of that. That's like part of my job at Tech. And I found that the experience was actually, there it is right there. So surprisingly mobile. So this was just in a studio, but we also had a portable green screen. So we were able to go to the family reunion over the summer and like literally set up a studio like in a bedroom with 2 oral historians and a filmmaker. And I think that it really did add a lot, it seemed like, to the interpersonal aspects of the story throughout, especially when it came to people talking about the meaning of slavery in their own lives in terms of like intergenerational meaning, and why solitude is important for people that, you know, no longer live in the area.
Yeah, I just want to, with actually bringing in those videos, so that one video that we showed, that one clip, you know, that is a full body video, whereas the other videos we have of sort of the rest of the descendants are all waist up or cut in different ways, so they're not full body. But despite that, we still found people were very engaged with those videos. They felt very conversational and personal still, even though they're presented in this frame. So they clearly don't blend as well into the environment, but people don't really seem to mind that actually. So I just found that was something interesting.
Yeah, and I remember some of our earlier conversations about that kind of issue, whether we needed to do something like put like a lectern or a photo frame or something like that around people, you know, just in case it seemed weird to the viewers. But, you know, as you guys have said, it really doesn't look weird, and people seem to really appreciate it. Even, you know, doesn't seem to matter whether it's full body or not.
The fact that it's not scripted is also, I think, very helpful. There's a spontaneity there that we can kind of build into a tour that is otherwise like very carefully curated and scripted and timed. So I thought that it's like a really interesting change of pace and like adds like visual movement also.
Yeah, yeah, I'd agree with that. And interactivity has been something that we've tried to keep an eye on. And obviously, you know, it would be a mistake, I think anyway, it would be a mistake to have it completely free flowing so that people can just explore by themselves. So we've tried to strike a balance between scripted, you know, tour guide type narration and very clear instructions about where to go and what to do, with those opportunities to sort of do your own thing and explore a bit more the bits that interest you the most. So Nick, am I right? The tour is about 20 minutes altogether, but it could be as much as half an hour if you really choose to dig into some of the additional activities. Is that right?
Yeah, so just going through, so the tour is divided into 4 sections. And so yeah, I think those 4 sections take around 20 minutes or so. And then if you really wanted to go through, especially in the section where we talk about slavery, if you really wanted to go listen and look at everything, that's probably an additional 20 minutes, maybe a little bit longer. So yeah, it is a sort of up to 45 minute experience. After that, there's probably not much more for someone to look at.
Yeah, and this is another short video clip, and this may have changed. So like as with Thomas before, apologies, Nick, that basically I feel like I'm always asking you guys, can I have a new clip for such and such a presentation? And I thought this time I would go easy on you. But anyway, this will give you a sense of a slightly earlier version of the interactive activities you can do with historical documents. One of the problems, of course, of telling stories about enslaved people, and even more so indigenous people who lived in this place and worked in this place, is that they did not leave the same kind of documentary evidence behind as many white people did. So that's one of the challenges, and we've got different ways of dealing with that. One of the good things about the slavery section is that there were certain members of the Fraction family. Again, they were a family enslaved at Solitude, and also some of them at Smithfield as well. But one of the points at which they kind of entered the written historical record was during the Civil War, when 2 brothers, Thomas and Othello Fraction, managed to escape from Solitude, made it to Tennessee to an enrollment officer for the Union Army, and signed up to serve the US. So we've got documentation for that. And then they ended up coming back to Solitude after the Civil War to visit with some family members, and they ended up getting into an altercation, a gunfight really, with their former slaveholder, Robert Taylor Preston. So there's more documentation of that, and those are some of the documents you can see here and you can explore if you take the AR tour. Any questions, additional comments?
I do have a quick question, and it may be out of scope right now, but you talk about all the rich history that goes on campus, which is amazing. Obviously, it didn't just happen in this small little area of Blacksburg. It happened throughout the rest of the surrounding communities. So is there any ideas or work going on right now that's linking kind of these things? So it's like, if I'm thinking about, young kids in the area that have grown up here and then don't know, like you said, this hidden history, are they able to kind of follow the footsteps in sort of a way, right? Because I think you guys are visually creating this way to do that, which is amazing. But is there a way for them to get the full story?
Yeah, that's a really good one as well. I would say that for our team's purposes, we have to be fairly tightly focused, especially, with the emphasis on place. And we talk a lot and think a lot about the importance of being there, especially with the AR experiences. So with those, we have to be fairly tightly focused. I would say the History Council in general is absolutely trying to look beyond campus and recognize that, communities in Blacksburg, Christiansburg, Wake Forest are deeply connected to the stories we're telling that took place on the campus. So I think there are efforts underway to involve surrounding communities, not just as audiences, but as storytellers as well, and participants in the rethinking of Virginia Tech history at the sesquicentennial. But again, for us, we're sort of more tightly focused. I would say though, this feels like a good moment to talk about one of Todd and some of the others' previous projects, which was about the Christiansburg Institute. I don't know if you want to give the brief overview of that, Todd. Seems relevant.
Sure. Back in, well, it took several attempts to get the funding, but the funding ended up being for 2013 to 2015 from the NSF. We built a on-site augmented reality app that we ended up dubbing CI Spy, that was intended to help young learners to learn to perform historical inquiry by doing it, and doing it in the field with the sort of primary source documents and oral histories that they might have otherwise obtained by looking into archives or visiting libraries or maybe a museum, presenting those things contextually on the site, the grounds of what was once the school. And Thomas modeled these beautiful buildings that were once the buildings of the campus. It was 180 acres or something, I believe, at one point, 13 plus buildings. It was truly a campus. It was a African-American school founded by the Quakers in the late 1800s. Booker T. Washington was involved at one point. It's got a lot of importance to not only the local and regional story, but the national story of civil rights. And with the desegregation of public schools in Virginia, the Institute was shut down, and all the kids were then dispersed to public schools around the county. And the site sat fallow for decades, and most of the buildings were torn down, and all that remains today is this one brick building on an otherwise fairly plain site. And so it was an opportunity for us to try these ideas of exposing hidden histories and putting kids to work, employing some of the inquiry skills that are a higher order level of thinking than simply memorizing names and facts and dates. So how's that?
Yeah, good. And I'd say that, the methods you guys worked out in that project fed directly into what we're doing. I mean, that was kind of the model going into BT 150 was CI Spy, I'd say.
Yeah, and believe it or not, Thomas and I still didn't have hair. It wasn't that long ago, but the first thing that we started working on was working on the story of Newtown. I don't remember how we got connected, but David Hicks and I met Thomas, and he was working on a little mini seed grant to go out and do some laser scanning of the Oddfellows Hall, which is the little white building, looks like a schoolhouse almost, kind of nestled between the North End Center garage, the big pit that used to be Buffalo Wild Wings, and Wendy's. And that used to be the center of a neighborhood here in Blacksburg, but over the years, the residents got dispersed, of course, to the edges of town, and a lot of the homes got relocated. But we were able to start testing some of the technical techniques we wanted to use on that project that then rolled into what we did at Christiansburg Institute. That was more of a pedagogical process or project with a technology scaffold. And then those things roll forward to things like this. And we're still, I'd say in these projects, we're still very much in the technical development stages, to where we can then think about how some of these things could be used for both formal and informal learning. But right now we're still working on some of the technical aspects of it, the design aspects. So.
Yeah, with the real quick with the Newtown and Oddfellows Hall project that we did, I think that was the first time of working with a community too, to get
Mhm.
that those stories that are quietly leaving us. A lot of the people that we have interviewed have passed away, so it's critical to get feedback and from that community to be part of that project was pretty incredible.
Mhm.
So I think there's lots more potential as well, you know, for outreach to surrounding communities to not to tell people their own stories, but to help provide ways that individuals and communities can tell their stories and get them out there in new kinds of formats. Other questions, comments? I have a couple more things that I can say, but don't want to hog the mic too much.
Overall, I think this is amazing. The only thing I can see you guys doing next is like the Underground Railroad, right? Combine the full quad experience with this and like show us what it's like to run away from the South.
I'm really interested in playing with integrating map data or GIS data into AR, so you can see a larger scale spatial information that could be part of a story in AR. I mean, that's a perfect example of it, because you know there's routes, there's homes, there's, you know, obviously constant dangers, but then there's specific things like how we're going to get across this particular river, and lots of different aspects that's all completely invisible, but someone's mapped a lot of it, I'm sure, and it could be put together into a very large narrative. In fact, I feel like I remember there was a big project a few years ago about the Underground Railroad, maybe from Nat Geo or someone, I don't remember, but
I was gonna say this has interesting interdisciplinary potential because I recently saw an article about Harriet Tubman as like an unsung naturalist. There's like a lot of like that's a huge angle to that story too, is you know the whole environmental aspect.
So one other thing I can share with you, we also, you know, even though, as I've mentioned, place is really important to us, and we see most of what we've worked on so far as an experience that people come to a particular location and have, particularly, you know, in 2020 and 2021, we've been aware of the fact that it's really good to offer people experiences that they can do from home, that they don't have to come to campus and be around other people to experience. So we've been working on a couple of strands of that. One of them, Todd mentioned before, is the Pablo tour of Pedro Yates, which he and a couple of his fellow computer science students put together last fall, and he's continuing to work on that. And you can see the draft of the PY tour at this address if you're interested. But the other approach we've taken to that idea of making some of these experiences accessible at home is by doing 360 video versions of the tours. And this is, you know, it's in draft form, but this just gives you an idea of what one of our collaborators, Taylor Carroll, has been working on. So it's basically 360 video footage outside Solitude, and then she has layered on some of the video and photo assets that we've been using in the AR tour. And so we still need to tinker a lot with it and figure out, you know, getting back to what I was saying before, what works in this particular technological format, because, you know, you can't just do the same thing in AR as 360 as other kinds of technologies. But yeah, providing some sort of version of the tour to people at home seems really important at the moment. So we're trying to work on that too. Let's see. The last few slides I'll share just kind of capture the way we work as much as the actual projects we've been doing. So definitely transdisciplinary, lots of time trying to explain ourselves to each other, and, you know, here's what works in this discipline, and here's how we can bring different kinds of questions, different kinds of methods and techniques together. We already saw this slide with Jessica interviewing Kara Mosley-Hubbs. And then the power of place is really important. You can see these are some of the students we've worked with over the years, working on the student protest and then at Solitude. And one of the really nice sort of maybe unintended consequences of the project is that for the team members, both faculty and students, and I definitely include myself in this group, it's just been really nice to get to know our campus better than we otherwise would do. You know, many of us would never spend much time at Solitude or, you know, Williams Hall, looking at the place where that student occupation happened. So for me, it's been really cool just to experience that and learn about the place we spend so much time in. And we also have been increasingly going around to various places presenting our work, even on the campus radio, or the university library's radio show a year or two ago. So we feel as though, you know, what we're doing crosses the line, crosses the usual borders between research, teaching, and outreach. I think what we're doing has implications for all three of those areas, and is a nice way to get to know the place we inhabit and the community that we're part of. So the last slide I'm going to share is the website. First of all, I've said it deliberately several times in case anyone wants to check it out, and there it is. And then a listing of our team members, and Sarah and other newish members. I was able to update this since I didn't need to ask anyone for their photos. So that hopefully is a comprehensive listing. As always, if I've left anyone out, please let me know. But that's what I have for you, and I'd be really interested to hear any additional questions, feedback, or other members of the team if you want to jump in and let me, you know, add anything that we haven't spoken about so far.
Thank you so much, Paul. And that last slide is the hardest part of these bigger projects that go on over several years, keeping up with making sure you give everyone credit. It requires its own whole process. So congratulations. Yeah, thank you very much. Does anyone else have any other questions or discussion or ideas or interest in engaging?
I know, Paul, you mentioned how exciting it is for us to find out a little bit more about our campus. It is each day you find something new, and makes you proud to be working here at Virginia Tech. But it's also the students. I've known several times when they see the images of like the Vietnam protest, they just can't believe that happened here. So all these hidden histories is just like pretty overwhelming to see that what we're doing has an impact on their perception of the school, because they think of it as this perfect school. But, you know, there's been some challenging times here, and it's great to be part of that.
If I could add to that same sentiment, I know, Paul, we worked on a similar kind of tangential project, looking at the stuff, working with the Ujima Living and Learning community, that's the African-American community, undergraduate community here. And they expressed the same thing. They were just like, you know, it was from the opposite. They, you know, it wasn't always the glowing history of Virginia Tech. They always knew it about the other side of Virginia Tech. And it was always kind of this place like, why are you going to this university? But them coming here and then understanding that people like you and the rest of your team, the entire team, are taking the time to really unearth these histories and show it to them. So they took a huge appreciation for that. So I just kind of want to pass that along with you too, is saying is it's great for, especially me being an African-American, seeing that people are out there pulling out history that I would never know of. More importantly, was actually buried and hidden from me. So applause to that. So thank you.
Oh, that's fantastic to hear. Thank you. Yeah, and that makes me want to emphasize as well that we also recognize that the stories we tell have to be honest and balanced. And there's sometimes, you know, I always find Virginia Tech is really good at emphasizing the positive and generating pride in being a Hokie. And, you know, there's certainly a lot of that comes out of its history, but then, you know, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't also acknowledge that, you know, the experiences have been very mixed, and there's a lot of good and bad kind of bound together in the history of this place. A lot of ambivalence, and Kenny's work on African-American students, I think, is the project that brings that out more than any other, is just the experiences that the early African-American students had, but you know, also right down to the present day, finding Virginia Tech a place that is, you know, somewhat home, but they have to make a real effort to build communities, and from the beginning weren't as welcome, you know, as we wish they would have been. So yeah, I think the honesty of history is really important to keep going, and it's not only a celebration. You know, I think the university as a whole, you know, sometimes likes to think about the 150th as, you know, an entirely positive celebration, but you know, I think we're here partly to say, you know, hold on, it's also a learning experience, and for that we need honesty.